Chapter 456, Burial Ground of Bones. Right now, my best choice is to search for a quiet place and meditate with my mind cleared. After that, I'll extract the poisonous wasp's nectar and raise my power, or perhaps I'll crack open the crimson stones instead. But I don't know whether there is any nectar in the poisonous wasp's body. I might think that there is, but there's also the possibility that there isn't any nectar. If there is, then once I consume it, I'll have to isolate myself for some time. It would have been fine if I was alone, but now, I'm bringing Lan Lan and Ahu along. Su Ming stood on the crimson dragon, and as the dragon charged forward at a rapid speed, he turned his head around to look at the nervous but excited teenagers. Oh well, I know now that the process of activating the path of a soul catcher isn't that dangerous. It's just that it'll take some time. Su Ming had already made a decision. He flipped his right hand in the air, and immediately, 2 wooden slips with maps carved on them appeared on his hand. One of these maps came from Nangong Hen, and the other came from Mo Bai. If he compared the both of them, he would find that the latter map was more complete, and a simple outline of the area beyond those 1 million lees was also provided. On the map, near the edge of the 1 million lees to the northeast of Shaman City was a region that was about several tens of millions of lees. There was a gigantic beast bone drawn on that spot. That bone looked like that of a snake's, and even though only a simple outline of the skeleton was provided, it was still a rather terrifying sight to behold. That's the burial ground of the Candle Dragon. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He put away both maps, then sat down cross-legged on the Crimson Dragon's head and closed his eyes, exercising his breathing. The journey to activate the path of a soul catcher was actually very simple. A person with the constitution of a soul catcher just needed to get close to the dragon's burial ground and sense the Candle Dragon's will, which had yet to disappear. If the person could sense the dragon's will stronger, then it would be of a much greater help to his or her training in the future. This was just like the Berserker tribe's Berserker's initiation. However, the Berserker tribe had been passing down their legacy for their cultivation methods for a very long time, which had allowed them to be able to pass down their legacies independently. That was also the reason why the elders of Berserker tribes could help the others activate their cultivation. However, since the legacy of the soul catchers, spirit mediums, and thought soothsayers of the shaman tribe came from the world of 9 yin, that was why no one could take the place of those particular spots in helping these people activate their cultivation. They could only come to those places personally and experience it themselves to be able to get it. The Crimson Dragon shot through the sky, and it did not stop as it charged forward. Since it was a life created from earth and aura, it could be said that the dragon was a creature existing between the state of an illusion and a physical entity. Its perception was incredibly sensitive, and it could detect all sorts of dangers, which was why it had been able to change its direction 3 times as they went forth without Su Ming even needing to warn it. It would either circle around the area or avoid it. There was a gentle screen of light around Lan Lan and Ahu's bodies. That screen of light allowed them to not feel the powerful high wind, and they would occasionally look down as they sat on the dragon's back. As time passed by, the excitement on their faces gradually diminished. On the other hand, their anxiety grew stronger. They knew that what they would be facing next would be the main reason for why they came to this place, to obtain the acknowledgement of the Candle Dragon's will and to activate the path of the soul catcher. Before they came here, their patriarch had already told them that in the history of the shamans, not all those with the constitution of soul catchers could get the acknowledgement of the Candle Dragon's will. For some unknown reason, there were quite a few who could not obtain the dragon's acknowledgement and could not activate the path of a soul catcher. These people ended up either practicing other cultivation methods or living mediocre lives. There might only be a few of such people, but they existed, which was why Lan Lan and Ahu's anxiety became even stronger as they got closer to the Candle Dragon's burial ground. Several days later, when most of the shamans were still in Shaman City, participating in the treasure gambling, a ray of crimson red light flashed in the clouds near the edge of the 1 million lees region northeast of Shaman City. That flash turned into a 10,000 feet long crimson dragon that lingered about in the sky. Su Ming, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes at that moment. His gaze was as bright as lightning as he looked at the ground underneath. The entire land was shrouded in fog. There was a mountain range that formed a ring around the area that surrounded the entire region. The fog in the mountain range did not remain stagnant but was tumbling about slowly, continuously rising into the sky or sinking into the ground as if it could never remain still. From the sky, it could be seen clearly that this particular region was darker than the area beyond. The thick clouds there gave off a heavy feeling to the people watching. Soon after Su Ming began observing this region, a gust of freezing wind blew towards him, sweeping up the fog on the ground and causing them to tumble about violently. The instant that wind blew into Su Ming's face, his pupils shrank. He saw droplets of rain falling from the clouds in the sky above this region as that freezing wind started blowing. The rain was not heavy, but as it fell down, it turned into ice-cold water, causing the freezing air in the area to become even more bone-chilling. This was a mysterious region that covered several tens of thousands of leagues. Besides the sound of rain and fog, there was no other sound. The area was in a state that was almost akin to dead silence. However, in the midst of this silence, suddenly, a faint voice floated from within the fog where Su Ming was looking. "Heat is the father." That voice was ancient and sounded as if it came from a long time ago. The voice seemed like it was mumbling, as if it was talking in whispers. As it echoed in the air, it caused the fog to spread slightly outwards. The instant Su Ming heard that voice, he sensed the strange snake in his body shivering in Han Mountain Bell. Su Ming's expression changed. Then he swiftly looked towards the thick fog from where the voice had come. Not a single person could be seen there. As rain fell, each droplet dispelled some of the fog. However, as the fog scattered away, more of it would seep out from other places, causing the fog in the area to remain a constant existence. After a long while, Su Ming averted his gaze and looked towards Lan Lan and Ahu. The both of them seemed to be ignoring that voice, which made it clear that they did not hear it. In fact, even the Crimson Dragon only continued pacing about in the air. It had its eyes fixed on the fog in the region, but besides this particular action, it did not have any other reaction. It was as if Su Ming was the only one who heard that voice. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. After staring at the fog for some time, he spread his divine sense into the region, but like a stone sinking into the ocean, his divine sense disappeared without a trace. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he moved off of the Crimson Dragon. The moment he left it, the Crimson Dragon turned into a red mark and branded itself on Su Ming's arm. As for Lan Lan and Ahu, they were brought by Su Ming to the ground in the form of a long arc when he waved his arm towards them. Su Ming did not choose to fly in midair. In the birthplace of the shaman tribe's famous soul catchers, he decided to be extremely careful with his actions. When the three of them descended on the ground, Lan Lan and Ahu's faces turned a little pale. They looked a little scared as they followed closely behind Su Ming. The three of them moved forward in this silent region quietly with Su Ming walking in front and the two teenagers at the back. Not a single word was exchanged between them. They stepped on the mountain region's rocks while having the freezing wind blowing against their bodies. The wind brought with them a few droplets of icy rain, and when those droplets fell on their bodies, it left them drenched, and the freezing wind felt as if it could seep into their bones. Strangely though, there was a wave of heat from the ground. When they stepped on the soil, the heat from the earth would seep through the bottom of their shoes and surge into their bodies through their soles. Because of that, waves of heat and cold clashed in everyone's bodies. Lan Lan and Ahu's faces turned stark white and they followed Su Ming, shivering. Before long, they arrived at the top of a mountain range. When they stood there, the freezing wind blew even stronger. Right beneath them was the fog-covered region. It was also the burial ground of the Candle Dragon, which covered an area of several tens of thousands of leagues. "Are you ready?" Su Ming stood on the mountain, at the edge of where the fog started rolling about on the ground. He did not turn his head back, simply looked at the rolling fog as he uttered his very first sentence ever since he came to this place. "I'm ready, Xianxia." Ahu gritted his teeth. His body might be shivering, but his face was filled with determination. "I'm ready as well." Lan Lan bit her lip and nodded. Su Ming no longer spoke. He simply took a step forward and walked straight into the fog. Lan Lan and Ahu quickly followed behind him. At the start, their backs could still be seen in the fog, but gradually, as they continued moving forward, the fog surged towards them and submerged the three of them within like a giant mouth. The instant Su Ming stepped into the fog, he froze for a moment. That ancient voice reached his ears once again. That voice sounded as if it was mumbling and whispering, just like before. It echoed in the air all around him, causing the fog to move like the waves on the surface of a sea, rising and falling as they tumbled about in the air. Cold is the mother. The instant Su Ming heard those words, the strange snake suddenly lifted its head, shivering in Han Mountain Bell, and let out a whine. That whine was filled with dreariness and sounded like a mournful whimper. It was as if the snake had sensed something. That whine was akin to that of an infant abandoned by his mother who was crying out helplessly and in distress when night arrived and he could not find that familiar person by his side. However, that whine only echoed inside Han Mountain Bell and did not spread outwards. Su Ming's heart shook. He had begun making guesses about that strange snake's origin since a long time ago, especially when the end soul catcher Xianxia had cried out about sensing the candle dragon when he sensed its presence during the time Su Ming ran into Autumn Sea Tribe. Yet he still remained uncertain about its origins. However, when Su Ming saw the strange snake's trembling body and heard the desolate cry, all his uncertainties vanished. At that moment, he was absolutely certain that even if this strange snake was not a candle dragon, it was definitely directly connected to it. Lan Lan and Ahu still could not hear anything. They could only see Su Ming's back in the fog. Everything else was shrouded in fog, and they could not see anything else. It was precisely because of this that the fear and anxiety in their hearts became stronger as they moved deeper into the fog. This is yin and yang. The sky is the father, and the earth is the mother. This is yin and yang. As the three of them continued onward, the voice that only Su Ming could hear suddenly echoed in the air once again. This time, the whines from Han Mountain Bell became even more sorrowful and miserable. About an hour after Su Ming and the other two teenagers vanished into the fog, the space outside the fog on the mountain range distorted and out came a person in black robes. Hesitation shone in his eyes, but soon, as a glint appeared in his eyes, that person stepped into the fog and disappeared. Chapter 457, Carcass of the Candle Dragon. Su Ming's eyes sparkled and his face was filled with caution. Once he took a few steps forward, he suddenly saw a white shadow flashing past in the fog in the distance. That white shadow traveled incredibly quickly and disappeared without a trace in an instant. It only left behind the fog rolling about in the area, and not a single sound traveled forth. Su Ming came to a stop. He was not the only one who saw that white shadow. Lan Lan and Ahu had also seen it. The two of them immediately became even more anxious. They did not dare be too far apart from each other and followed behind Su Ming closely. "Senior, what is that?" Lan Lan asked in a whisper. "I think that's a woman." Ahu clenched his fist and kept his gaze fixed at the spot where the white shadow had appeared. A glint flashed through Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand swiftly and swung his arm before him. Immediately, there was a muffled low growl. Then, the 300-something feet spirit of 9 Yin appeared before Su Ming. Once the spirit came into being, he seized at the air with his right hand, and red light flashed instantly out of nowhere to gather into a red battle axe. That battle axe looked exactly the same as the battle axe that had shattered when he fought against the Grand Elder of the God of Shaman's Temple. With that battle axe in hand, he turned around and cast Su Ming a glance. "Your duty is to protect these two children," Su Ming said slowly. The man nodded. Once he swept his gaze past Lan Lan and Ahu, he surveyed his surroundings. The group continued moving forward towards the center of the fog. There, at the center, would be the carcass of the candle dragon. Once they were there, Lan Lan and Ahu could approach that skeleton and sense its remaining will. If they were acknowledged, then they would have completed their test. Su Ming had come to understand from Nan Gong Hen that the test was not actually very difficult. In fact, they were not the first batch of people to be there. Every single time the world of 9 Yin was opened, a large number of people with the constitutions of soul catchers would come here. There were no dangers lurking in the fog. In truth, the biggest threat in this test lay in the journey and their companions. However, Su Ming had arrived to this place early, at a time when other people were still participating in the treasure gambling event in Shaman City. There should not be too many dangers in this place. However, the strangeness in the forest a month ago and the many dangers he ran into after that had shown that the world of 9 Yin now was different compared to the past. Life-threatening crises had appeared in originally safe places. If that was the case, then there was no guarantee that this place would not suffer the same fate. About 2 hours since Su Ming and the group had moved into the fog, the white shadow that had appeared before suddenly flashed before them once again, and just like before, it disappeared into the distance in an instant. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He did not give chase. However, Lan Lan and Ahu became even more scared. The two of them held hands, and they could feel the cold sweat on the other's palm. At that moment, green light suddenly shone at the center of Su Ming's brows. The small virescent sword manifested instantly and charged behind Lan Lan and Ahu, slashing downwards. When it cut down, the fog behind the boy and girl suddenly tumbled about, and a beast claw made of fog stretched out to crash into the small virescent sword. As a muffled boom echoed in the air and the beast claw was cut apart by the sword, it turned back into fog. The spirit of Nine Yin laughed savagely and threw his battle axe away. That battle axe turned into a long red arc and instantly charged into the fog, and a shrill cry of pain traveled forth, but it soon disappeared in the distance. That scene happened too quickly, so quickly that Lan Lan and Ahu did not even have time to react to it. Su Ming's expression was dark as he walked in the fog. He first looked into the distance, and then cast his gaze at the ground. With a swing of his arm, a small area of fog was instantly swept away to reveal a mass of flesh about the size of a palm on the black ground. A rotten stench spread out, and it was enough to make everyone nauseous. Su Ming stared at that mass of flesh and frowned. Suddenly, he heard that ancient voice from the fog once again. This time, that voice was much clearer, and it sounded as if it was coming from a spot much closer than before. The left eye of the descendants of the Candle Dragon are the day, and their right eye is the sun. When they close their eyes, the sky will turn dark, and when they open their eyes, the sky will turn bright. As that voice spoke, the whines from the strange snake in Han Mountain Bell grew even stronger, but Su Ming stayed silent. "Let's go." He turned around and ignored the mass of flesh on the ground, bringing Lan Lan and Ahu further in the fog with the spirit of Nine Yin behind them. Time gradually passed by. As they continued onward, they ran into attacks just like the one before several times. Fortunately for them, the spirit of Nine Yin was around. With his strength, he prevented the creatures hiding in the fog from killing them. Su Ming could not tell whether it was still day or night outside, but judging by the fact that they had been traveling for several hours, it should be night time outside. Su Ming was walking forward with Lan Lan and Ahu, and slowly, a gigantic dark shadow appeared in the fog before him. That shadow looked like it was 10,000 feet tall, and it remained hidden in the fog, still and unmoving. At first glance, it looked like a building, and an indescribable feeling spread through the entire area. That feeling could make a person feel depressed. Su Ming looked at the shadow, and right at the instant he focused his gaze at the thing, Lan Lan suddenly let out a cry of surprise. When she cried out, Su Ming immediately turned around and looked over. He could not spread his divine sense too far, only a few dozens of feet away, which was why he could detect the attacks from the beasts in the fog, but if he wanted to look further ahead, he would have to rely on his eyes. At that moment, he cast his gaze in the direction where Lan Lan was looking in fear, and straight away, he saw a faint figure in white about 100-something feet behind them, hidden in the fog where they had just passed through. That figure seemed to be sitting on a rock with the back turned towards them as it cried silently. Sobbing sounds echoed in the quiet fog. At the moment those sobs traveled forth, Lan Lan's eyes grew glazed. Ahu was in the same situation, looking as if he had lost his soul. Su Ming's expression turned even darker. Just as he was about to take action, the sobbing sounds suddenly increased in number, and the additional crying voice came from Su Ming's right side. When he looked over, he immediately saw another white figure crying several hundreds of feet away to his right. That thing had its back turned towards him, and he could only see its long hair. Those sobbing sounds only served to make Su Ming annoyed. He let out a cold harumph and took a step forward, charging straight at the white figure to his right. As for the spirit of Nine Yin, he immediately stomped on the ground after Su Ming sent a single thought to him, and a screen of light swiftly appeared around Lan Lan and Ahu to protect them. Then, he took a step forward and rapidly closed in on the white figure that had appeared behind them with his battle axe in hand. With a flash, Su Ming's clone appeared to his left and his poison corpse manifested on his right. In the blink of an eye, they closed in on the white figure, and the sobbing sounds became even clearer. However, right at the instant they got closer, the white figure suddenly turned around to reveal a breathtakingly beautiful face that would make hearts pound. Yet a sharp screech suddenly came from the woman's mouth, and with a hum, that screech turned into a wave, and just like how a wave of sound would, it rushed toward Su Ming. At the same time, the white-robed woman's body abruptly swelled up and was torn apart from within, turning into a mass of black flesh and blood that charged toward Su Ming while a rotten stench spread through the air. The instant that flesh and blood appeared, Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized at the air with his fingers. Immediately, a whirlwind gathered in his palm, drawing in the fog from all around him before he rammed his palm on that mass of flesh and blood. Immediately after, green light shone on his clone, and the small sword grew into a big sword that sliced horizontally through that mass of flesh. The clone also started forming multiple seals, and once he formed the final seal, he jabbed at that mass of flesh. The poison corpse's actions were the most straightforward. He did not do anything except open his mouth and breathe out a puff of poisonous fog that seemed no different from the fog around them. As if it contained life, that fog turned into 9 small snakes once it left the poison corpse's mouth and charged out ferociously. All of these divine abilities were executed within an instant, and they all charged towards that mass of flesh. However, right at the instant they were about to crash into each other, the mass of flesh gathered together in midair and turned into a woman's face. That face was filled with murderous intent, and before Su Ming's divine abilities could touch it, it started burning on its own. It was reduced to smoke in an instant and disappeared without a trace. Su Ming's pupils shrank, and when he whipped his head back, he found that there was only fog behind and all around him. There was no spirit of 9 yin, no Lan Lan, no Ahu. The area was not silent. Sobbing sounds echoed around him as if they had surrounded him. Those crying voices increased in number, and in the span of a few breaths, it sounded as if there were several of these women hiding in the fog. Petty tricks. Su Ming let out a cold harumph and forced down the annoyance in his heart. Once he calmed his mind, he lifted his right hand, and with a flash on his palm, a spiked club immediately appeared in his hand. Once Su Ming held it, he immediately lifted it up. As buzzing sounds echoed in the air, the spiked club's length swiftly increased, and in the blink of an eye, it became 100-something feet long and several dozens of feet wide. Su Ming leaped up, and with a low roar, swung the spiked club upwards in the shape of a fan before he slammed it down on the ground. Move! When Su Ming spoke, the spiked club grew several times in size once again while falling downwards. The instant the club crashed into the ground, it was already nearly 1,000 feet long and several dozens of feet wide. Veins had popped up on Su Ming's arms as he held that spiked club, and the berserker bones in his body shone with a golden light. The gigantic spiked club crashed into the land with a huge bang, causing the ground to tremble and the sea-like fog to look as if it had been ripped apart by 2 hands. With the spiked club as its center, the fog rolled backwards in both sides. In the blink of an eye, there was no longer any fog within a circular area of several thousands of feet. In the distance, Su Ming saw the spirit of 9 yin shuddering due to its struggles to break free. There was an eyeball of several hundreds of feet before him. The eyeball seemed to contain the power of a soul catcher, and its center was torn apart like a mouth. It was luring the spirit of 9 yin to move towards it slowly. Behind the spirit of 9 yin was a screen of light that was on the verge of shattering, and there were several figures in white crying shrilly behind it as they continuously rammed their bodies against the screen. Inside were Lan Lan and Ahu, whose faces were pale with fear and despair. As the fog continued rolling back, Su Ming saw clearly further down that area of several thousands of feet a gigantic skeleton of 10,000 feet. That skeleton looked like the tail of a gigantic python. Most of its carcass had already decayed, and only some scales were left. When Su Ming looked over, the tail of the skeleton was so long that he could not see its end, and if the tail itself was already such a shocking scene, then the whole body might be an unimaginable sight. Candle Dragon. Su Ming's pupils shrank, and within Han Mountain Bell, the strange snake let out its strongest cry. Chapter 458. Descendants of the Candle Dragon. The situation was perilous. The screen of light protecting Lan Lan and Ahu was shining furiously, looking as if it was about to shatter. It would only be able to persevere for a few more breaths before it disappeared completely. Once it disappeared, then the fragile boy and girl, who were not even fledgling shamans, would shatter with just a touch. Similarly, the spirit of 9 yin was also caught in a life-threatening crisis. He was actually struggling due to that strange giant eyeball, even though he had the power of a latter shaman. By the looks of it, he was in a considerable amount of pain as he was continuously pulled near the tear in the eyeball, and the eyeball looked as if it wanted to devour him. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and without any hesitation, he charged towards Lan Lan and Ahu like a bolt of lightning. His clone and puppet followed closely behind him. At the same time, the mark of the crimson dragon on Su Ming's arm shone, and as a low roar echoed in the air, the dragon appeared. With a swing of its huge head, it rushed towards the spirit of Nine Yin, who was being dragged towards that eyeball, and swept its head across the land. Su Ming's speed had reached its peak, but right at the instant he was about to close in on Lan Lan and Ahu, the screen of light shattered with a bang under the impact of those white figures and their shrill cries, turning into a large amount of fragments that scattered everywhere. The white figures pounced on the children. Su Ming's face turned dark. His clone let out a low growl beside him, and his body disappeared in an instant, only to reappear right when the screen of light shattered and the white figures pounced on the children. As Lan Lan's face was filled with despair, the area before her distorted, and Su Ming's clone walked out, and when he did so, he formed a seal with his right hand and patted the air before him. With that one pat, the fog around the area immediately started churning rapidly, as if there was a great force bursting forth and pushing outwards from the clone's palm, like a vase full of water shattering with an explosive bang. The pouncing white figures let out piercing screeches, and once the impact crashed into their bodies, they froze for a moment in midair before tumbling backwards. Without a hint of hesitation, Su Ming's clone waved his arm, using the force from the motion to immediately bring Lan Lan and Ahu away from the spot and back to his side. The remaining white figures let out piercing shrieks, and just as they were about to rush over, due to the clone's impeccable aid, Su Ming managed to arrive at the most crucial moment. Almost at the instant the clone brought Lan Lan and Ahu away, Su Ming himself came charging and arrived swiftly like a violent gust of wind. The poison corpse came with him. With murderous intent burning on his face, the moment Su Ming closed in, he clenched his left hand into a fist and hurled it straight at one of the white figures. His fist traveled so quickly that the white figure did not even have time to dodge before the fist rammed into its body. That figure was immediately ripped into pieces, but when those pieces turned into a layer of fog that spread backwards, it gathered together once again. The same thing happened over at the poison corpse's side. A vengeful spirit. Su Ming let out a cold harumph, then flipped his left hand over. Immediately, dark light started flickering around him, and Han Mountain Bell swiftly manifested. Once that bell appeared, Su Ming formed a seal with his hands and pointed towards it. The nine-headed dragon's illusion instantly formed outside the bell, and the dragon roared right when it appeared. As it roared, the white figures froze up and did not dare come forward. Instead, they moved swiftly away, as if they wanted to escape into the fog, but with murderous intent raging on his face, Su Ming formed several seals with his hands, and the sixth head of the nine-headed dragon opened its eyes, widened its mouth, and sucked in a deep breath in the direction of those white figures. Those white figures immediately shivered and turned into wisps of fog, and as if they could not control themselves, they were all sucked into the sixth head's mouth and were devoured. That sixth head even chewed a few times, looking as if it had just had a tasty meal. During that time, the spirit of Nine Yin was on the verge of being devoured by the giant eyeball with a dazed look mixed with a hint of struggle on his face. However, the crimson dragon's head rammed straight into the spirit's body with a huge force, and from the distance, he looked as if he was swept away by the crimson dragon's head, causing his entire person to be forced out from the eyeball's strange soul-catching abilities. At the same time as the spirit of Nine Yin was knocked away, the crimson dragon let out a low roar. It lifted its claw and swiped it at the eyeball, but right at the instant its claw was about to touch it, grey fog filled the inside of the eyeball and it disappeared without a trace, causing the crimson dragon's claw to swipe at air before falling on the ground, which made it tremble. All of this seemed to have happened over a long period of time, but in truth, only several dozens of breaths had passed since the moment Su Ming and the group were ambushed. When the white figures were devoured by the nine-headed dragon and the giant eyeball disappeared, everything returned to silence around them. The fog that was blasted away by Su Ming's club also came rolling back from all directions, as if it wanted to submerge the entire area once again. The spirit of Nine Yin crawled up from the ground and pulled off his helmet from his head. His expression was dark, and his eyes were burning in anger, but at the same time, there was also wariness within them. The spirit of Nine Yin cast Su Ming a glance before he spoke slowly, enunciating each word clearly. You shamans didn't keep to your promise. You must have gone past the edge of the seal. That is why the seals are being continuously broken, and now abnormalities have appeared on the sacred 9-yin skeleton here. That eyeball just now doesn't possess incredibly powerful divine abilities, but its soul-catching abilities aren't something an ordinary person would possess. That is the sacred 9-yin's second eye. I was the one who rented you with scattering dusts, and I was also the one who saved your life just now, Su Ming pointed out calmly. The spirit of 9-yin fell silent, and after some time, he began to laugh wryly. Did you just mention the sacred 9-yin? Su Ming put away the spiked club and turned his head around to look towards the pale Lan Lan and Ahu, then swept his gaze around the area before finally landing on the gigantic carcass 1,000 feet away. The dead body you see now is the sacred 9-yin's carcass, which is also known as Candle Dragon among you shamans. I was thinking that there was something off about this place just now. By the looks of it, those white figures are the vengeful spirits belonging to the enemies who were killed by the sacred 9-yin in the past. The beast claw in the fog we met previously is formed through the sacred 9-yin's decayed flesh. When you shamans broke the seal here all those years ago, you caused the sacred 9-yin's will to scatter. You people had even thought about taking the carcass away, but once you found that you could not, you had your descendants come here to sense its will so that your so-called soul catchers could be born. Then you came to our tribe so that you could work together with us to seal up this place along with a few other spots. But while those seals look sturdy, they are actually very fragile. Once ripples of power that are equivalent to those of N shamans come from the outside world, then the seals will shatter. That one doesn't count among those that would shatter the seal, the spirit of 9-yin said, casting a glance at the crimson dragon. Su Ming looked at the gigantic carcass. Most of its carcass had already rotted away, but not a hint of the smell of decay could be detected from its body. After a moment of pensive silence, Su Ming walked towards it. Lan Lan and Ahu quickly followed behind him. The spirit of 9-yin cast an incredibly wary look at his surroundings before he too followed behind them. The crimson dragon floated at a low altitude. Its eyes sparkled as it surveyed its surroundings cautiously. The air here made it uncomfortable, and that gigantic carcass especially filled the place with an oppressive air. As the crowd moved closer, the fog from all around them slowly seeped closer, causing the area around them to gradually turn foggy once again. Then, when Su Ming arrived beside the gigantic carcass, he stopped. He stared at the Candle Dragon's carcass for a moment before he spoke unhurriedly towards Lan Lan and Ahu. Get closer to the carcass here and sense the Candle Dragon's will. Now, whether or not you will be able to activate the path to become soul catchers will depend entirely on your own serendipity. The pair of teenagers might be afraid, but they nodded their heads resolutely. Then while holding hands, the both of them sat down cross-legged and closed their eyes, silently circulating the blood in their bodies which held that weak bloodline connecting them to the soul catchers according to the method their patriarch had taught them. Su Ming did not know how long the boy and girl would take. Once he ordered the spirit of 9-yin to protect them and had the crimson dragon keep a close eye on the area along with fighting off all threats as well, he leaped up into the air and charged into the fog in the sky to appear on the gigantic Candle Dragon's carcass. When he stood there, Su Ming could see the dark shadow of the Candle Dragon's carcass under his feet stretching endlessly into the fog, and he had no idea just where the end was. In fact, when he looked at the shadow, he had a feeling as if the Candle Dragon's carcass was a path that led to an unknown destination. Only when he stood up there did he manage to smell a faint and indistinct foul stench spreading out from the carcass. Su Ming's heart shook slightly. This was the biggest creature he had ever seen, and with just its physical body alone, this beast could already startle a person. He could not imagine just what sort of power could bring about this beast's death, except that it had finished walking through the course of its life and reached the end. Perhaps it had indeed walked through the course of its life and chosen this place to die. Su Ming looked at the distance that stretched down endlessly and once again felt that there were simply too many forms of power and materials he did not know of. When he put himself in comparison to these things, a feeling that he was insignificant blossomed in his chest. Su Ming sighed. Just as he was about to leave and return to Lan Lan and Ahu's side, his footsteps suddenly froze, because right beside his ears, that ancient voice echoed once again. The Candle Dragon's tribe will never die and be destroyed. Even if the world crumbles, we will not. Even if the heavens rot away, we will not. In my long life, I have devoured 97 worlds and more than 100 billion lives. When I open my eyes, I can see the skies from all worlds, because I am day itself. When I close my eyes, I can let the darkness I see cover the heaven of my world. In my life, I have devoured 3 of the descendants of my tribe, so that my life will lengthen. They did so willingly. This is how the Candle Dragon's tribe grows. My child, you will be. As that voice echoed in Su Ming's head, the strange snake in Han Mountain Bell let out a piercing cry. The grief in that cry made Su Ming's heart clench in pain. The grief in that voice gave others the impression of an indescribable sorrow of a wanderer who was devoured alive by his own kin after finding his family after a long period of time spent unable to find home. The strange snake lay within Han Mountain Bell, shaking as it continued crying incessantly. A freezing glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. In silence, he leaped down and descended from the Candle Dragon's carcass to land on the fog-covered ground. Chapter 459. Fulfilling the Promise. Time passed by slowly as Su Ming sat cross-legged before Lan Lan and Ahu. The spirit of 9 Yin might also be sitting beside them, but his gigantic stature made him look like a small hill. The Crimson Dragon floated in midair and remained cautious as it surveyed its surroundings. Su Ming had his eyes closed. His expression might be calm, but his heart remained uncertain, and that uncertainty stemmed from the strange snake's current dejected look and the continuous forlorn cries. The snake's emotions had transitioned slowly from the excitement it felt in the beginning to its current sorrow. This gradual transformation made the snake look incredibly pitiful. Have the Candle Dragon's tribe always devoured their kin to grow since the beginning of time? After an unknown amount of time, Su Ming opened his eyes and stared at the Candle Dragon's carcass with a chilling glare in his eyes. If that is the case, then this Candle Dragon that died a long time ago and only has a hint of its will left clearly wants to devour my snake so that it could use its life to revive itself. But since the members of the Candle Dragon's tribe have always devoured their own kind, then perhaps my snake can also devour this Candle Dragon. As Su Ming mulled over his thoughts, he looked towards the spirit of 9 Yin. You mentioned that the giant eyeball we saw just now was the Candle Dragon's second eye. How many eyes does this Candle Dragon have then? The spirit of 9 Yin opened his eyes and replied in a whisper, "It has 4. The Candle Dragon has 2 heads. One of them is a python's head, and the other is a hidden head that is similar to mine. Each of these heads has 2 eyes, which is why it has 4 eyes. That giant eyeball just now is one of the python head's eyes. We have detailed descriptions of the sacred 9 Yin in the legends passed down among my people. Once it dies, it must be sealed, or else its blood and flesh will turn into ominous fog, its grudge will turn into spirit tears, its bones will turn into the bone fiend, and its eyes will turn into the Yin funeral. That I just now clearly woke up because the seal has weakened. Once it fixes its on something, then with my current level of cultivation, it will be difficult for me to escape, and I will need someone to save me." The spirit of 9 Yin's voice echoed in the fog and fell in Su Ming's ears. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. "If you are eaten by the crack in the pupil of the Eye of Yin funeral, then will you turn into a soul catcher's puppet?" he suddenly asked. "Puppet?" The spirit of 9 Yin shuddered when he remembered what nearly happened just now, then shook his head. "You won't turn into a puppet, but all your flesh, blood, and essence will be sucked away, and you will turn into a dried corpse. But that's not all. Your mind will be captured, and you will enter the undying and imperishable world created by an adult Candle Dragon. You will live a life akin to being sealed up for eternity over there. You will never be able to escape, and you can only fight continuously against the numerous living souls that have been killed by the Candle Dragon when it was alive. You have to fight endlessly, and even if you die, you will be revived shortly. And it will only stop when your will crumbles and you submit to the Candle Dragon. It will only stop when you become part of the undying and imperishable world. Your corpse will stay in the Candle Dragon's body and turn into his flesh and blood. This is a fate more terrifying than death. Compared to that, it is much better to die in battle," the spirit of 9 Yin said in a low voice, and Su Ming could feel the fear in his voice clearly. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he asked, "What if I don't submit to it? Is it possible to walk out of the undying and imperishable world?" "Walk out?" The spirit of Nine Yin cast a deep look at Su Ming. When a candle dragon is alive, it will need to receive offerings from all sorts of tribes and races. The more offerings it receives from the living, the stronger it will become. This is one of its inborn abilities. Look at your soul catchers. You should be able to imagine just how strong that ability is just by seeing how its dead will is able to create soul catchers in your tribe. The soul catchers are equivalent to the worshippers of the candle dragon. However, since there aren't many soul catchers among you shamans, that is why my people allowed you here. When it is necessary, the candle dragon will devour a certain race, but similarly, the races who offer themselves to it will obtain a privilege, and that privilege is to enter the candle dragon's undying and imperishable world. The spirit of Nine Yin's voice became lower. A privilege. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. That's right. Training in the undying and imperishable world and going through all endless cycles of life and death will allow you to understand the origins of battle and forge you into the strongest warrior. Each of the races who make offerings to the candle dragon will choose their best to receive this privilege. He or she might not be able to increase his or her level of cultivation much, but that person's brutality and decisiveness in battle is something no one else will be able to compare to. Because they have simply gone through too many cycles of life and death. However, this will only happen when the candle dragon is alive. It can release the people it captured at will, that is why it is considered a privilege. But once it dies, then this will no longer be a privilege. This is a cage that is even more terrifying than death. Perhaps there are people who have indeed managed to walk out of the candle dragon's undying and imperishable world, but no one from my race has ever been recorded to have done so. Su Ming fell silent. The spirit of Nine Yin stopped speaking as well. When approximately 2 hours passed by, suddenly, the Crimson Dragon let out a low growl in midair. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He saw the white figures appearing once again in the fog in the distance, and they did not come alone. There were 8 of them, and they were drifting about in the fog while letting out wailing sobs. When those wails fell into Su Ming's ears, they annoyed him again. But that was not all. Besides those white figures, another roar would occasionally echo from within the fog, and Su Ming could somewhat see bodies covered in scales as the fog tumbled about around them. Apart from these creatures, Su Ming also saw a gigantic dark shadow in the fog. That dark shadow was 100-something feet tall, and it was floating in the fog. When Su Ming saw it, he immediately had the feeling as if his gaze was stuck to it. That dark shadow was clearly the giant eyeball that had disappeared just now, the candle dragon's second eye. Don't move. The spirit of Nine Yin's eyes flashed and he stared fixedly at the creatures in the fog as he whispered. By right, they won't come near. After all, they're born from the candle dragon, and they only attacked us just now because we didn't have the dead candle dragon's will on us. Right now, those 2 people of yours are sensing its will and area about to turn into its worshippers. Since they're doing this, they won't attack. Once those 2 have been acknowledged, then with them around, we will be able to walk out, we shouldn't be attacked anymore. As the spirit of Nine Yin spoke, he swept his gaze across the area. Su Ming did not act recklessly. As time passed, he found that the spirits in the fog were just as the spirit of Nine Yin said. They were only lingering around and did not come too close. When he saw this, Su Ming sent a thought to the Crimson Dragon to placate it slightly, but he continued remaining on guard. When another hour passed by, Su Ming's pupils shrank. He saw the number of white figures in the fog increasing, and there were now about several dozens of them around. Similarly, the ferocious beasts hidden in the fog had also increased. They stood close to each other and numbered to hundreds. Low growls and sobs fused together to turn into waves of sound. Apart from that, as Su Ming and the spirit of Nine Yin remained alert, sharp howls came from within the fog. They seemed to have come from a distance when they first sounded, but closed in within an instant. A dozen-something rays of white light shot out rapidly from the fog and turned into arcs that impaled the ground hundreds of feet away from Su Ming and the group. The dozen-something rays of white light were grey bones. Once those bones impaled the ground, they immediately melted to turn into small grey humanoids that were filled with murderous aura. The moment those small humanoids appeared, Su Ming fell into shock, because he realized that the appearance of these humanoids was incredibly similar to the small humanoid sealed within the mountain rock. However, when he took a closer look, he found that they were slightly different. These small humanoids were all gray and not black. Their appearances were also indistinct, and they did not have detailed facial features. There was a crack where their eyes should be, and another crack where their mouths should be. The bone fiends have also appeared. Looks like the seal hasn't weakened but has been damaged. The spirit of Nine Yin's expression immediately changed. Su Ming's expression turned dark. Without a single word, he stared at the creatures in the fog. When he looked over, another dozen something white figures had come. Clearly, as time passed by, the amount of spirits in the fog would increase. At that moment, Ahu, who had his eyes closed, suddenly started trembling violently. Pain twisted his features, but gradually, that pain turned into determination. However, in the midst of determination, Su Ming saw a hint of respect as well. Acknowledgement. By what the spirit of Nine Yin said, to obtain the right to practice the ways of the soul catcher, they must first acknowledge the candle dragon as their master. Su Ming remained silent. This was something concerning only White Bull tribe. He had no reason to interfere. After a moment, pain also appeared on Lan Lan's face. She looked as if she was struggling, but those struggles did not last too long before they turned into an expression of respect that was similar to Ahu's. Soon after, the two of them opened their eyes almost simultaneously. A dark light appeared in their eyes before it disappeared slowly, and in Su Ming's eyes, the two children already looked slightly different from before. Thank you for your help, Xianxia. Ahu stood up and wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming as a form of gratitude. Lan Lan did the same thing by his side. Once they thanked Su Ming, they looked towards the creatures in the fog. This is a deal made between your patriarch and me. You don't need to thank me. Once I send you back to Shaman City, I will have fulfilled my end of the deal. Su Ming stood up and swept his gaze across the creatures in the fog. Xianxia, don't worry. I can sense that they harbor no ill will towards Lan Lan and me. We can leave without any problems, Ahu said quickly. When he walked forward, the creatures in the fog did indeed move away to reveal a path for them. However, when Su Ming moved closer, the creatures in the fog immediately let out a shocking roar. The white figures shrieked and the fog beasts growled. The bone fiends howled and the giant eyeball in the distance floated out from the fog and stared at Su Ming. Take the two of them back to Shaman City, Su Ming stated after a moment of silence. Chapter 460. Breaking in Alone. The spirit of Nine Yin cast Su Ming a glance and looked as if he wanted to say something but was hesitating. In the end, he did not say anything and only nodded his head. You saved my life and you are also my employer. Once I send them back safely to Shaman City, I will rush back here. If you still haven't walked out by then, I will wait for you here for 10 years. The spirit wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming, then walked towards Lan Lan and Ahu. The boy and girl turned their heads back to look at Su Ming. They had complicated expressions on their faces but did not say anything. Instead, they turned around and walked quickly towards the fog with the man. When they saw that Su Ming did not move, the creatures in the fog spread out and opened up a path for them to leave before they sealed off the place once again. A freezing glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Just when he was about to send out his thoughts, that ancient voice appeared in his ears once again. This time, that voice sounded as if it was right beside him, and it echoed incessantly, seemingly without end. You will be the fourth of my kind that I will devour. Come, let me eat you. This is the fate of our race. You will disappear, and I will wake up once again. The candle dragon's essence, the brilliance of the sky, and the light of the earth will give us the long life that belongs to us candle dragons. When the ancient voice uttered those words, a strong desire could be heard in them. This was the first time any hint of emotion was revealed in that voice. The instant that voice spoke, the strange snake let out its loudest cry in Su Ming's Han Mountain Bell. Its body trembled, and blood capillaries appeared all over its scales, making it seem as if it was about to shatter to pieces. It rose, and the instant it crashed into Han Mountain Bell, its body turned into an illusion, and it left Han Mountain Bell to appear before Su Ming. Su Ming had never seen this sort of ability from it before, but he did not have time to think about it. The snake that was about the size of his finger let out a strong screech towards the sky in the air. As it cried out, The wails of the white figures around him also reached a piercing volume. The roars of the fog beasts shook the skies. The bone fiends also started howling louder. Even the fog around the giant eyeball had started tumbling about viciously. It was as if all sounds were pandering to the strange snake screeches. Struggle appeared in the snake's eyes. It turned its head back and cast a glance at Su Ming in midair. There was an unwillingness to part in its eyes, along with sadness and attachment. When Su Ming saw the small snake's eyes, his heart trembled. As the snake cried out, the beasts in the fog that were blocking Su Ming's way spread out and opened up a path for Su Ming. If he continued down this path, then he could leave the burial grounds of this candle dragon without any danger. This was clearly the path left behind by the snake for Su Ming. There were still blood capillaries spreading out from the snake's body. It turned away, and with a grief-stricken cry, the struggle on its face growing even stronger, it charged straight towards the candle dragon's carcass. Its body was no longer under its control, and it crawled in the body, whose exact length was unknown, then rushed straight towards its head. Su Ming's eyes gradually turned red. He could leave right now, but he would not. This snake had stayed with him for many years, and when he had returned to that cave abode after disappearing, he had sensed the snake's joy. Right now, he absolutely could not just watch the snake disappear into the candle dragon's body and wait for its own kind to devour it so that the dragon could turn it into its life and resurrect itself. Su Ming lifted his left hand swiftly and waved it at the air. Zi Long Shen. With one wave of his arm, the mark of the spirit of 9 yin on his left hand immediately started flashing with a brilliant light. Then, with a sigh, the old spirit of 9 yin slowly manifested before Su Ming. Please enter the candle dragon's body and stop it from devouring my snake. Su Ming looked towards the old man. The old spirit looked at the candle dragon's carcass and said in a low voice, "I can't help you. We worshipped this sacred 9 yin when it was alive. Its will is still remaining as of now, and there is a sort of madness in that will. I can't fight against it." The old man averted his gaze and looked towards Su Ming apologetically. Su Ming's heart fluttered with anxiety as he said immediately, "I'll give you more spirit plunders." "It doesn't matter how many spirit plunders you give me. With this will around, it is difficult for anyone to enter its body. But since that snake belonged to you before, then perhaps you can go in, but I can't." As the old man spoke, he took a step forward and appeared before a damaged part on the candle dragon's carcass. The moment he was about to enter, a huge rebounding force suddenly surged out from the candle dragon's body. When that impact crashed into his body, the old spirit was forced several steps back, and he turned to look at Su Ming with a bitter smile. Su Ming stared at the candle dragon's carcass. A glint appeared in his eyes, and he made his decision. Sometimes, there was no such thing as what you should do and what you shouldn't do when it came to how you should act in certain matters. In those occasions, you only need to feel what you must do it, and that was what you should do. Su Ming took a step forward, then lifted his right hand to point at the crimson dragon in the sky. The dragon instantly turned into a red light and charged towards him. Once it turned into the mark of a dragon on Su Ming's arm, he rushed straight towards the candle dragon's carcass. Right behind him were his clone and the poison corpse. However, right when Su Ming got closer to the candle dragon's carcass and was about to crawl in through that damaged area, a strong rebounding force surged out from the skeleton and swept through Su Ming's body in an instant. When that power swept through him, Su Ming trembled and a strong repelling force along with a nearly crazed will spread through his entire body. The strength of that will was so great that it caused Su Ming to feel as if he was plunged into a raging sea. It was as if he was a boat trapped in a roaring sea, and he was incapable of resistance. "Go away!" There was a roar contained within that will. That roar surged straight into Su Ming's mind, causing his body to tremble, and the mark of the dragon was forced out of his body. Su Ming coughed out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale, and once he was pushed back hundreds of feet, he coughed out blood once again. He lifted his head and stared at the candle dragon's carcass with an incredibly dark face. The old spirit of 9 yin sighed and shook his head beside him. He was just about to say something when he saw a glint flashing past Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the crimson dragon. Immediately, the crimson dragon that was forced out of his body turned into a mark on his arm once again. At the same time, Su Ming cast a glance at the old spirit of 9 yin and sent his thoughts to him. The old man sighed. His body gradually dissipated to eventually turn into the faint mark on the back of Su Ming's left hand. Once he finished doing all these, Su Ming put away the poison corpse and his clone, wiped away the blood at the corners of his lips, then took a deep breath and had his divine sense surge into the black stone fragment hanging on his neck. The dark light on the stone fragment instantly shone brilliantly, and the moment it covered Su Ming's entire body, the snake's presence appeared around him. The presence felt incredibly real, almost as if he was the snake itself. The instant that presence took form, Su Ming executed his absolute speed, and he shot through so quickly that he closed in on the candle dragon's carcass within an instant. At the same time, the rebounding force disappeared right when it touched Su Ming, and he heard a faint gasp of surprise from the will that descended on him. Su Ming knew that he could only deceive it for a moment. Very soon, the dragon's remaining will would figure it out, and then, no matter what, it would be difficult for him to try and enter the candle dragon's carcass again. Without a hint of hesitation, he charged forward, straight into the candle dragon's body. Yet at the very instant he was about to enter the candle dragon's carcass, the mark of the crimson dragon on his arm was separated from his body once again, along with the marks on his left and right hand. The poison corpse and the clone in his storage bag were also pushed out from his body as if they had been screened. They were all blocked out of the candle dragon's body. Only Su Ming himself and his nascent soul could enter the candle dragon's body. Apart from them, everything else was blocked out. Su Ming's face was as dark as night. He took off his mask. At that moment, he was on a dried-up path of flesh and blood. Everything around him was dark, and a rotten stench filled the air. This was the candle dragon's tail. Stepping on this road felt like stepping on mud. It was a revolting feeling. Su Ming looked around him. His nascent soul returned to his body, and with a brilliant shine in his eyes, he spread his divine sense around, but it was immediately absorbed by the flesh walls around him. He could only spread his divine sense to an area of 100 feet. Not only did this place block his divine sense, it also cut off his connection with his puppets, the Crimson Dragon, and the spirits of 9 yin. Fortunately though, since he and the snake were in the candle dragon's body, his connection with it still remained. He charged forward without a word, rushing onward with the connection as his guide. Su Ming's poison corpse sat near the tail of the gigantic candle dragon's carcass with a blank expression on his face, where Su Ming had crawled into and disappeared. He sat there cross-legged, still and unmoving. Ji Yun Hai's corpse fell to the side. The black beetles that filled his entire body also remained motionless. The Crimson Dragon was letting out low roars, and it paced around the area as it growled. There was anxiety on its face because it could no longer sense Su Ming's presence. After a long while, it chose to shrink its body and turn into a small dragon, landing right on the spot Su Ming had disappeared to wait for him. The old spirit of 9 yin was frowning and sighing repeatedly at the moment. It was not that he did not want to help, but he truly could not enter the candle dragon's body. He was a little curious as to how Su Ming managed to do it though. Perhaps he truly had some of the candle dragon's presence remaining on him, which was why he could enter. The change of presence in Su Ming's body just now had surprised the old spirit greatly. This child has great fortune. That small snake is clearly a descendant of the candle dragon. It is incredibly difficult to meet such a ferocious beast now. Oh well, I'll wait here for some time. If he manages to come out, then I can continue fulfilling my end of the deal with him, but if he doesn't, then I'll just have to treat it as a loss. The old man sighed and sat down by the side.